All right, history is literally happening right in front of our eyes. We have the liberal destroy Trump. Mainstream media is now in a free fall and on the brink of complete and total collapse. That's not an overstatement. It's not hyperbole. Now, these propagandists and champions of fake news continue to be exposed day after day, and CNN is leading the way. Now, I'm going to share my advice for the head of CNN, their chief of fake news and propaganda news, Jeff Zucker, in just a minute. Jeff, I'm trying to save your career. But first, let me explain how one of the biggest anti-Trump networks has lost all their credibility and can no longer be trusted by you, the American people. Now, at this point, we should put CNN 6 feet, you see right there, underground for repeatedly spreading lies, propaganda, black helicopter, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, and for viciously trying to take down this president. Now, let's just look at some of the network's many controversies and scandals they've had. There's the image of CNN's former New Year's Eve co-host. Really, it's so graphic. Every time we show you, we have to put a warning on the screen. Kathy Griffin, posing like an ISIS fighter. Look at how despicable that is, with a bloody, severed head of a Trump lookalike. Pretty disgusting. And after that vile photo shoot, CNN then fired Griffin. Fair enough. And then earlier this month, CNN cut ties. Remember Reza Aslan? That's the unhinged liberal responsible for disturbing tweets like this one, quote, "This POS," you know what it is not just an embarrassment to America and a stain on the presidency, he's an embarrassment to humankind. Oh, that's fair and balanced. Now, kicking unhinged liberal hosts to the curb is just the beginning of CNN's massive credibility crisis. CNN has been routinely humiliated for pushing their fake news. Remember, earlier this week, 3 so-called journalists allegedly resigned, I don't believe that, after the outlet had to retract a completely made-up story about a Trump ally, a friend of mine, Anthony Scaramucci, which claimed that Anthony was being investigated for colluding with the Russians through dealings with a Russian investment fund. You know, CNN and the rest of the destroy Trump media, they have tried to play it off, oh, it's just an honest mistake, and say that CNN did the right thing. They retracted the story. But according to an explosive report in the New York Post, it appears that CNN may have been forced to correct the fake news hit piece. Take a look at this headline. CNN faced a $100 million lawsuit over botched Russia story. Now, according to the Post, CNN quickly retracted the story. Why? Anthony Scaramucci threatened a massive libel lawsuit. Now, of course, that example is not the only time CNN has gotten a story completely wrong. Let's go back. Let's stay right here in the month of June. June 16th, the network had to delete a tweet and issue a correction for saying, oh, only Democrats were praying before the congressional baseball game. Remember after Steve Scalise was shot in the assassination attempt? And the day before that, well, CNN's senior unhinged White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, he tweeted, then deleted, his ridiculous claim that President Trump didn't visit Congressman Steve Scalise in the hospital. Not true. And also earlier this month, the head of the former FBI director, James Comey, in his testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee, CNN had to alter a report that said that Comey would contradict President Trump's statements about not being under investigation by the FBI. Wrong. The embarrassment for CNN doesn't even end there. Now, take a look at the time CNN covered the president's so-called eating habits. These are really, really hard-hitting investigative reports that really matter to all the Americans in poverty, on food stamps, and out of the labor force, and those that can't buy a house. This matters to them. Take a look.
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone else around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
Really? That's news at CNN? And there's this ridiculous comment from the network's top news anchor. Watch this.
He's the president of the United States. If he wants to say that, Barack Obama wants to say whatever. If George Bush says, I looked in his eyes and thought he was
took a dump on his desk, you would defend it.
Say it.
Now, such hard-hitting news, which brings us to CNN's political commentator, yes, the one and only Van Jones. Remember, former Obama administration official, constantly smearing and slandering the president. Now, tonight it appears Van Jones may have some explaining to do. Why? James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, has now released a new undercover video. It features Van Jones. In the tape, he appears to admit that there's nothing to back up the left's Russia collusion narrative that has been going on 11 months. Now, Fox hasn't independently verified the contents, but you can see it for yourself. Take a look.
Hey, man.
The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
And just yesterday, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, released yet another undercover tape, which apparently shows a CNN producer finally just admitting the truth that the network has a massive anti-Trump agenda. Okay, yeah, we haven't been able to verify, but we have. Take a look. Watch.
You win because you know the game and you play it right. She didn't play it right.
Then why is CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now. My boss, a couple days yesterday, we were having a discussion about this dental shoot, and he's like, I just want you to know what we're up against here. And he goes, just to give you some context, President Trump pulled out of the climate accords, and for a day and a half we covered the climate accords, and the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
But honestly, you'd think the whole Russia is just like
could be. I mean, it's mostly right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. But then they say, well, there's still an investigation going on. And you're like, yeah. I don't know. If you were finding something, we'd know about it. The way these leaks happen, they'd leak it. It'd leak. If there was something really good, it would leak.
Whoopsie daisy. Looks like Jones, it looks like CNN President Jeff Zucker have real serious explaining to do. Now, CNN did put out a statement yesterday. They're standing by their producer, which I'm glad. This guy's not going to get fired. They didn't mention anything about Zucker's let's get back to Russia comments. Let's be clear tonight. Zucker is leading all the fake news circus at CNN. And as we said last night, all the blame for what is happening at CNN should be on his shoulders. Now, he's positioned his network to be one of the mainstream media leaders in trying to take down the president, this anti-Trump hate. He needs to be held accountable. And tonight, I'm going to do Jeff Zucker a favor. Hey, Jeff, you want to restore any sense of credibility at your network, you need to stop trying to destroy the presidency of Donald Trump and be on a jihad agenda to attack. And if you're willing to lie and collude to do that, really, where are your ethics? Instead, here's my advice, Jeff. Start focusing on the 6 massive scandals that should really be investigated but are not being reported by your network. James Comey admitting under oath that he had his friend leak a memo to the New York Times, hoping it would lead to a special counsel. By the way, Jeff, look into the Records Act. That might have been violated. That's a felony. And by the way, also, there's former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch possibly obstructing justice. How? Interfering in the Clinton email investigation. Now, senators are starting to look into that. Jeff, I suggest that you and your network may want to do some investigative work here. Now, Comey testified that Lynch told him to call the Clinton email investigation, not an investigation, a matter. And he listened. And don't forget the 40-minute tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton just days before Comey let Hillary Clinton off the hook. And then, of course, next is Hillary Clinton's many, many scandals. Jeff, there's a lot of smoke and fire here. And there's now evidence to suggest that the original server investigation was, in fact, compromised. Plus, there's also the Clinton-Russia collusion story. That's the Uranium One deal. We had 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material for nuclear weapons. She signs off a waiver. It goes to Vladimir Putin and Russia. And meanwhile, people involved in the deal are kicking back millions to the Clinton Foundation. Jeff, that's called pay to play. And by the way, destroying or mishandling classified information, those are both felonies. And by the way, President Obama also has a serious Russia problem. Jeff, you might want to investigate this. Remember, after he learned in August of 2016, Russia was trying to meddle in our presidential election. Why didn't he do anything? Also, look at Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. No matter how you feel about the guy, the only law we know that has been broken in this Russia collusion story is that they surveilled, unmasked, and then leaked intelligence on General Flynn. That's a violation of the Espionage Act. And finally, there's a special counsel. His name is Robert Mueller. Look at the glaring, potentially illegal conflicts of interest here. Mueller's BFF is James Comey. Members of the team that Mueller is hiring have donated to Obama and Clinton. That's called a conflict of interest. And one of the attorneys he's hired actually represented the Clinton Foundation. So, Jeff, these are 6 stories you at CNN, and frankly all of you in the left-wing destroy Trump media, should actually be covering. Instead of the black helicopter theories, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, you know what? Maybe it's time to step up, and instead of publishing fake, misleading, flat-out false news, maybe it's time to tell the American people the truth. Do some real reporting. Now, former Governor Palin, she's now suing the New York Times for an op-ed that was published after the shooting of Congressman Scalise. The Times editorial board incorrectly linked Palin's rhetoric to the shooting of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Now, the New York Times did later issue a correction, and also today we learned that Vice News had to retract 2 stories about President Trump. This never ends.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It is a week that will live in infamy in the history of CNN. And if anything, it is getting worse by the day. We have not yet installed a countdown clock to the next ethics scandal. We're considering it, though. In the meantime, here is the latest. Earlier today, Project Veritas released yet another undercover video discrediting that channel. Now, Fox hasn't yet confirmed the authenticity of the video, but it appears to show CNN contributor Van Jones admitting that the story his network has obsessed over from breakfast till bedtime for the past 7 months at least is basically a sham.
Hey, man.
The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Then why is CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Now, before we continue, one obvious point. The tape you just saw is a little creepy. Privacy is vital to the functioning of any society, not to mention to human happiness itself. And unfortunately, it appears to be disappearing in this country thanks to the digital revolution. Even cable news figures ought to be allowed to have conversations on the street without worrying that their private remarks are being secretly recorded, as they now so often are. Also, by all accounts, for whatever it's worth, Van Jones apparently is a nice guy. Everyone who knows him says so. That said, how wonderfully revealing this exchange is. The Russia story is a nothing burger? Yep, we knew that. If only they admitted as much on CNN. But in private, they know it too. You remember the tape released just yesterday in which a CNN producer conceded that his boss, Jeff Zucker, demanded that CNN shows drop actual news coverage in order to spend much more time on the Russia conspiracy, since that storyline makes more money for the network? It is as corrupt as you imagined it was. Meanwhile, according to the New York Post, CNN apparently had to retract last week's bogus Russia story and fire the 3 reporters who wrote it after being threatened with a $100 million libel suit from Anthony Scaramucci. He's the Trump associate who was slandered by the piece. Whoa! What is next for CNN? Well, on his show, Rush Limbaugh predicted the end may be near.
Could Donald Trump be the end of CNN? What a legacy that would be. I think that's what the Trump administration is doing with many in the media. They're like cats. He's got this little red laser light and is just causing them to make fools of themselves, and everybody's laughing at them as they're crashing into walls and sofa and the floor. And that's what little Jim Acosta had happen to him yesterday.
Oh. Cats to a red laser light. Awesome. Well, we don't know what's going to happen next at CNN, but whatever happens, this is clearly a network in crisis. And that happens to companies from time to time. Enron, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. It's not unheard of. The question is, how does your company respond when its corruption is revealed? Well, here's how CNN is responding. Its media critic Brian Stelter, who also hosts a show on the channel, let loose on Twitter today, attacking the forces of what he described as anti-journalism. Quote, activists promoting hatred and resentment of the press. Millions of people are exposed to extreme anti-journalism views daily, spreading hate about an entire class of American workers. Got that? American workers. In Stelter's telling, those would be journalists, the soft-handed Princeton grads who would be consultants at McKinsey right now if they hadn't worked on the school paper. They're workers. In fact, they're the opposite of workers. They're members of the privileged class, and their fear and outrage at the stirrings of populism is proof that they know they are. When the public speaks, they shudder because they know exactly how much they have to lose. Viewers no longer trust these people for a very simple reason. They're not trustworthy. And it's strange they don't know that. Let's say you own a potato chip factory, okay? And you once had an unbreakable monopoly on snack food. If people wanted potato chips, they had to buy them from you. Then one day, a new company comes along and starts making better potato chips at the same price. What would happen? Of course, you would lose market share. How would you react at that point? Would you try to make tastier potato chips? Or would you attack your customers as stupid and immoral, maybe go on a megalomaniacal rant about how consumers who don't like your chips are spreading hate? Well, it depends how deluded you are, I guess.
Senator Schumer says he'd like to come down and have all 100 senators come here to talk health care. Would you be willing to negotiate with all of them?
Got to find out if he's serious. He hasn't been serious. Obamacare is such a disaster, such a wreck. And he wants to try and save something that's really hurting a lot of people. It's hurting a lot of people. He'd have to be very, very serious. You know, he's done a lot of talking, bad talking, and he just doesn't seem like a serious person.
Interesting. Today, that was President Trump casting doubt on the Democrats' claim that they are really willing to compromise with Republicans on this health care issue. But Democrats aren't the only hurdle. More than half a dozen Republicans currently stand against their own party. Some of the GOP are offering warnings about what might lie ahead. Watch.
Republicans ran for office in 4 elections saying that Obamacare should be repealed. They eventually amended that to say it should be repealed and replaced. Conservatives are going to feel awfully hoodwinked. They'll be held to pay if they don't pass some version of Republican health care reform.
If we don't reach agreement by Friday, is probably the end of a sole party effort for health care. Then if we don't reach by Friday, then the way forward is, as Obamacare collapses, challenge Democrats to work with us to find something better.
Joining me now, one of those Republicans standing against the bill right now, ophthalmologist and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator, good to have you with us. Welcome to the program tonight. You are sort of the outlier in that you have put out some proposals today that you yourself said sort of went over like a lead balloon, but many of them are about repealing in the truest sense and offering some real market reform here. So are you surprised that you're not getting more traction with these ideas?
Well, you know, I think there's a breakthrough idea. I spoke with the president this afternoon, and he and I kind of came up with an idea that I think is really a breakthrough. And this would be to separate this into 2 bills. One bill would be the spending bill that has the keeping Obamacare spending and a lot of things the moderates want, and the other bill would be more of a repeal bill. The repeal bill would be the budget reconciliation bill that only has a simple majority. The spending bill would be a bill that actually is something that many Democrats support, such as the S-chip program, and you put the spending requirements that many of the moderates want on one bill, and then on the other bill that's purely or more purely a repeal bill, you stick with repealing the taxes, the regulations, and some Medicaid reform. And it's a much more narrow repeal bill. And then some of the things that Republicans want that require new spending or keeping Obamacare, if they're on a separate bill, I think you can actually make both factions of the Republican Party ultimately happy with that.
So are you saying that you could basically pass this repeal bill that would kind of deny Democrats and also some of the moderates in your own party from the opportunity to retain the parts of Obamacare that you don't like?
No, they'd get it in a separate bill is what I'm saying. So there'd be a repeal bill that I think everybody could vote for. We'd repeal a certain amount of the taxes, a certain amount of the regulations, and we'd also do some Medicaid reform. But then there would be a separate bill for all the people who want more spending programs. So some of the moderates in our caucus want more spending. We could put that on a bill such as the S-chip, which is a bill that every Democrat in Congress typically supports. And if you separate the bills, I think you could actually get to a passage where you repeal on one bill and you actually have some of the replacement spending on a separate bill that is one bill that Democrats would support.
You yourself said that, you know, the proposals that you made that I mentioned when we started talking went over like a, quote, lead balloon, I think were your words. But then you said after that you spoke to the president about this possibility of splitting the bill. How much support is there for that? Have you spoken to Mitch McConnell about this idea?
Yeah, the idea has been talked about for, I think, at least a year in private that there may be another opportunity of a separate bill that has more bipartisan support that would include some of the spending that some of the people in the Republican caucus want. And I think if you separate it into two bills, I think you could get this done really even by Friday. You could come to an agreement.
I mean, is this an idea that's getting traction right now? What does Mitch McConnell say about this idea? Is he saying to you, yes, let's try to push this through, and I think I can get it through?
I don't want to characterize his response. I would say that I have discussed the idea with him previously and also discussed it in front of all the senators at a lunch, that basically we would have two different vehicles and that we separate the vehicles. I think it's similar to the Henry Clay Compromise of 1850. They split their bill into four bills and different majorities passed different parts of it. This would be sort of a bifurcation into two bills. The spending, which every time you add more spending, conservatives like myself don't want to vote for more spending. And so every time they add more deregulation, the moderates don't want to get rid of the regulations. So why don't we separate them into two bills? One is primarily a repeal bill, and the other bill is primarily a spending bill. Conservatives will, in all likelihood, like myself, oppose the second bill, but it'll be spending that the Democrats have always supported.
I know, it's very interesting, and I understand. Before I let you go, because I'm out of time, do you think you could get the sort of 8 or 9 dissenting GOP votes on board with this? Can you narrow that margin to a point where it could actually pass?
Yeah, because I think there is a certain amount of repeal that everybody in the caucus is for. All 52 are for, but not all 52 are for more spending. Separate the spending, the new spending, and put it into a bill that will likely get Democrat support. I think you could get this over the finish line.
By Friday?
If you separate into two bills, I'm very confident we could. Let's see.
Let's see. All right, Senator, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.
Thanks.
Another day, another scandal for CNN. Today, Project Veritas, a conservative investigative group, released a video of prominent CNN left-wing contributor Van Jones apparently downplaying the significance of the Russia investigation. Fox News hasn't verified the authenticity of the video, but a man who appears to be Van Jones is heard saying, quote, "The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger." The video was released just a day after Project Veritas put out a separate undercover video of CNN health producer John Bonnefeld calling the Russia story BS. This, despite the network's nearly non-stop coverage of the investigation into possible collusion between the Russians and then-candidate Trump's campaign. And that's not all. Yesterday, we told you how 3 CNN journalists resigned over a retracted article that said a Trump advisor was under investigation for ties to a Russian investment fund. The New York Post is reporting that CNN only retracted the article after it was threatened with legal action. Take a listen to how radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh is reacting.
Could Donald Trump be the end of CNN? What a legacy that would be. I think that's what the Trump administration is doing with many in the media. They're like cats. He's got this little red laser light and is just causing them to make fools of themselves, and everybody's laughing at them as they're crashing into walls and sofa and the floor. And that's what little Jim Acosta had happen to him yesterday.
All right, so the news, the developments, yet another layer to the CNN problems, a network under siege. Greg, your thoughts?
Well, it's tempting to rip CNN to shreds given the pleasure they took in our travails. Or every Sunday that human thumb, Brian Stelter, would go off on us, and it's not a nothing burger, it's a nothing caviar. I will defend Van Jones in the sense that I don't think he was ever on the Russian thing. The narrative of the network, definitely, they're pushing this. But he always seemed more measured of the crew, that he kind of knew. So I don't think he's being a hypocrite. And so I have to praise him for being consistent off camera and on camera, because like I said, this will happen to us. If you aren't consistent on camera and off camera, and you say you're for something in the green room and you're against it when you're here, you deserve to be called out. I don't think that happened to Van Jones. One other point. I find it interesting how the media loves this kind of stuff when they aren't the target. Decades of consumer journalism were born from 60 Minutes. Every local TV news station had a consumer reporter that would dog some poor guy at a supermarket because he sold milk past the sell date. And it was like, you know, it was just ridiculous and absurd until then, you know, it happens to them, and then it's like, I hate this.
All right, well, CNN's doing a pretty good job of kind of doing themselves, and with this, Dana, a lot of people in the work are concerned about, you know, credibility, because this is a blow in terms of a news organization. You want your viewers to trust you, and that you're going to, in fact, you know, deliver the news and have accurate sources. It's what, you know, we all try to do and strive to do.
Well, certainly, and I think that one of the reasons they're upset is because I would say probably 98% of the people at CNN do try to do that. I mean, they do a lot of original reporting, right? They're all over the world. They're trying to do something. They did something terribly wrong. They apologized for it. They fired 3 people, whether it was because on the merits of the journalistic integrity or because they were worried about a lawsuit. And the threat of it, that's actually kind of interesting. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. But I also think about Van Jones. You know, we just showed a clip of him within the last 2 weeks when he was at that big Democratic convention meeting where he basically was saying to all of them, like, stop on the Russia thing because we are going to lose. We are ceding the policy ground. While everyone's going to be talking about health care or helping the working class, we're all talking about Russia, and you just burned $1 billion on an election, and you didn't actually help us advance the ball. So I think he is actually being consistent. And it's kind of a bummer that you can't feel like you have any privacy whatsoever in any of your conversations. But I guess for him, I do think that he has been consistent.
All right. So what do you make of this latest development with Van Jones? Do you agree with Greg that he was never really one that was out in front on Russia?
I'm sure you could find some tape of Van Jones saying some pretty horrific things about Trump and Russia. So I'll let the people on the internet find those and then embarrass CNN.
And get back to you in 2 minutes.
Exactly. Trump reminds me of Roadrunner. So he runs really fast, and then CNN's Wile E. Coyote. So Wile E. Coyote chases Roadrunner over the edge of a cliff, and then all of a sudden, Wile E. Coyote looks down, and there's nothing underneath. That's CNN right now.
Splat.
Splat. And they hit the pavement, and then they
Splat
try
News
again. But Trump has this effect on people. You know, Rush was talking about the laser beam, and I've said it before that Trump brings out the best in people and the worst in people. Right now, he's bringing out the worst in CNN. Not only are they fake news, they're very fake news, and it's hard to defend your integrity when you're firing 3 people, when some of your best and brightest analysts, put that in quotations, are saying something that is directly opposite from what your network has been pushing for the last couple months. They've had a rough stretch. Kathy Griffin, Reza Aslan, the guy that called Trump a vulgarity.
He's the worst.
He's the worst of the worst. They had to retract that whole story about the Comey memo and what he was going to say during the hearing. So they're in for a little rough stretch right now.
Bad run.
Courtesy of James O'Keefe. And, you know, everybody has to watch what they say because you never know when a camera's going to be there.
All right. So, Juan, hello.
Hi.
Good evening.
So I just think this is overreaction. I mean, I'm amazed that anybody thinking that the media doesn't make mistakes. Gee, welcome. The media makes mistakes all the time. It's just like talking to your friends on Facebook or anywhere else.
That wasn't this. These are seasoned reporters.
No, I'm telling you, these are very good reporters. They made a mistake. And guess what? We know networks and we know newspapers that have had to retract stories and haven't fired people and haven't apologized. But guess what? These guys did it. I work for the Washington Post. I work for NPR. I work for Fox. Everybody makes mistakes. I don't think this is
Juan,
new. But I'm going to tell you something else. Hang on, let me finish, Kimberly.
I know enough about the situation.
This was a mistake. But let me just say to you, when I look at the reality of Trump putting up fake Time magazine covers, I think, oh, fake news. When I hear about Trump saying Obama was spying on him while the campaign, and he can't prove it, I think fake news. When he says, you know, guess what? I've got tapes on Jim Comey, and there's no such thing, I think fake news.
Okay, so everything you just said, Juan, was fake news.
Yes, that's right.
Every single thing.
And so
what are you talking about, Time magazine covers? First of all, and Trump never said he has tapes on Comey. He said, there better not be.
I hope there better not be.
That you guys fell
Go ahead and play your word
and chase that rabbit for 3 weeks.
Everybody watching can see right through you.
No, but he told the truth, Juan. He said, I hope there aren't tapes, which created all of this stuff. But you can't tell the difference between that, Juan. You can't mock that.
I'm mocking it because guess what? He was trying to either bully or intimidate Greg. He was playing word games, and apparently He doesn't have the tape.
The
Maybe
media
now
is the biggest bully out there, Juan.
Right.
If you felt
media
they've been calling
bully
Trump
one.
names, trying to get him impeached. Finally, Trump hits the bully back in the face, and the bully doesn't know what to do anymore.
Is that it?
That's what's happening right now.
That's really what's happening.
And by the way, when people make an innocent mistake versus willful, deliberate, intentional decision to put forth a story that they know they didn't have the evidence or the facts to back up because it was untrue, then you get fired for an innocent mistake. You don't lose your job. Three people that have been there for a long time. I am telling you, you don't get to go out on the branch and it's going to snap off.
Okay, Kimberly, look at conservative media and the Seth Rich story.
Yeah.
Do you think conservative media is out there firing people because of this? No, I don't think so. I think they said, all right, so maybe we made a mistake. Let's move on. Fine. Everybody makes mistakes. This is not some huge conspiracy.
Legally, it's not a mistake.
To me, the big story here, Kimberly, is this. Right now, people are trying in the conservative media to put CNN back on its heel and underplay the idea that there's any legitimacy to this Trump investigation.
Poor CNN, Juan. We should really feel bad for CNN.
No, it's fine.
Did whatever the President Obama wanted for the last 8 years, then all of a sudden they try to get Trump out of office. They're making mistakes left and right. We call them out, and then they're saying, woe is me. Come on, Juan.
I'm not saying
it's a tough business.
You know what?
CNN has to toughen up and stop acting like everybody has to feel sorry for them.
Nobody's feeling sorry for them, but I think what Greg said right off the top.
On Twitter, he's acting like they're the biggest victims out there.
Well,
no, but I think they're bullied.
And he had to essentially make a retraction as well when they tried to push back on the stories. Well, we don't know if it's true, et cetera. And he had to come
I just
forward
think what you said at the top was right. They go after people like Fox all the time. They delight whenever we have troubles. So, okay, but let's not go over.
Yeah, but the other thing I said, it's not about Van Jones. It's about the narrative. What CNN did, which is bigger than all of this, was they chased a narrative instead of the facts. They couldn't find the facts.
Right.
So they ran with the story anyway. And I get it. They did it for ratings. Trump delivers ratings. It's why all the networks are going up.
Oh, yeah.
But the interesting thing about Fox News is we aren't chasing ratings. Trump just brings them. And if you just cover the news, if you just cover what Donald Trump is doing, your ratings will be fine. You don't have to create a story that doesn't exist.
So that's not a mistake. That is willful and intentional choice to push a story and a narrative regardless if there are facts to support it. Those are fireable offenses.
Well, no one's just, they got fired.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying this is not a mistake. A mistake is like, okay, by accident, I took a bite of Jesse's sandwich because I thought it was mine.
You wouldn't do that.
How dare you?
You're right. I'd eat the whole thing.
Juan, you know what you want?
Nobody says, I'm going to do something to get fired.
Juan, you know what this is like? This is like during the subprime mortgage crisis. You have J.P. Morgan or whoever pushing all these phony loans, and you have one of their biggest executives caught on tape saying, you know what, these loans are bogus. They're bogus. And their entire company's pushing subprime loans. This is what happened here.
No, it's not. The entire company, all of CNN is bogus now?
No.
Juan, did you understand my analogy?
Yeah, but I mean, they're not all.
It was a good analogy.
I thought it was pretty good.
And I do analogies well. I think it was a good one.
Thank you.
Here's the big question. They've had obviously a bad run with all these things that they've done in the conduct. Hopefully they learn, you grow from it, you move forward. However, what do they do as a network in terms of like communicating to their viewers, the people, so that they don't lose viewership? How do they get themselves out of this kind of PR mess or crisis?
Well, I'm not really in the business of helping CNN get more viewers.
Okay, say something.
But I would say one of the things that they've done.
Do the opposite thing.
That's what I mean. Opposite.
One of the things they did is that they have not pushed back or retaliated in any way against the people who have been in these videos. So they're saying, look, diversity of opinions is important to us. It's okay if people in the newsroom have lots of different opinions. Like in that video, the first one that we showed yesterday, the young man is saying that what he thought was more important as a story was climate change. And he says that he was frustrated because Zucker said, no, go back to Russia. And I think that Zucker, whether he was making a business decision or wanted to get back on the preferred narrative, I don't know. But they're in a new look. I fight with the producers every day about 100 stories that are in the National Review and Weekly Standard.
But we can't do dog stories in every block, Dana.
I sent a really good one about what's happening in Austin and Uber. I sent that this morning at 6:30.
That was very interesting.
So there's lots of different opinions, and I think that, look, when you're a 24/7 news channel, you have to put product on the air every minute of the day, and you just have to do better. But I think that we all wake up every day, we excited about our jobs, and we all want to do a good job.
Right.
So I don't think that's any different over there, but I guess they have to keep their employees solid first.
Right, but the problem is if they were chasing ratings regarding Russia collusion, which we've seen on MSNBC.
If that's true, then it did him in the rear end.
Well, there you go.
Watch your mouth.
Wow, never heard you talk like
that. This is a racy show.
Mark Stein is an author and a columnist. He's watched all of this pretty carefully, and he joins us now. What do you think of that, Mark? The whole "our viewers are terrible, consumers are bad if they don't like us" argument. Is that a winner?
No, it's not. And the idea of converting yourself into a victim group of I guess, journalist Americans, the latest hyphenated victim group, that isn't going to really going to work. And I think the problem is, to extend your potato chips analogy, is they're actually selling a bag that has all the packaging of potato chips, and there are no potato chips inside. That's the problem with the Russia story. They went bananas over that Malaysian plane that disappeared a couple of years ago, but at least there was a Malaysian plane that was here one minute and wasn't there the next. Here, there actually is no Malaysian plane, and they're covering it. I mean, you said Jeff Zucker is telling them to stop covering real news. You're not entirely accurate on that, Tucker. Yesterday, they interviewed Elmo about what he thought of Syrian refugees. And oddly enough, Elmo happens to like them. And that actually was the least nutty thing CNN has done in the last few weeks. It's the nearest thing to real news.
It's sad. I mean, there are actually a lot of talented people over there. I work there. I know a bunch of them. They're smart, serious people, but they're being pushed to the side in favor of this garbage. What about the prediction? You heard Rush Limbaugh, who you sit in for sometimes, say that they're going to be a casualty of the Trump administration.
Yes, I think that's likely, because the argument that Van Jones was saying, that it's a nothing burger, but it's ratings, that's true in the short term. But there are diminishing returns to this, which is that it's a Russian investigation with no Russians. The only Russian anyone ever mentions is the ambassador, who's like strolling around lunching all over the District of Columbia. He's the only sinister Russian in this story. It's a Russian investigation without any Russians. And at some point, it's going to be like one of those Russian dolls that all the tourists like. You open the big Russian doll, there's a smaller Russian doll, there's a teensy-weensy Russian doll, and then you open up the last Russian doll and there's nothing. And at some point, which I think actually the bulk of the American public have figured out already, there is actually nothing. We're down to the last minuscule Russian doll, and there's nothing inside when you open that up.
So you think that that's a critique of CNN, but I think CNN would call that hate speech. Do you think it should be allowed to, I mean, do you think you're making them feel unsafe by criticizing them?
Well, they actually are advancing the argument now that Trump pushing back against the media, which nobody likes. Nobody likes. Everybody, and I say this as someone in the media, and you're in the media, and you know that. People hate the media. Everybody hates the media.
That's true.
And they hate Jim Acosta going bananas at the White House press conference because the big mean press secretary won't let him turn his camera on. I'm in favor, by the way. I thought Elmo was excellent on CNN yesterday. I'm in favor of replacing Jim Acosta with Elmo at the White House press conference. The fact is, the public is on the White House's side. If Sean Spicer wants to conduct his press conference in interpretative dance, he can do that, and the public, by and large, if it's a choice between Sean Spicer announcing the Obamacare bill in interpretative dance or Jim Acosta doing his drama queenery, then people would rather have the interpretative dance of Sean Spicer. They're not going to go anywhere with this.
I think, though, the idea, and look, I'm not in charge over there, but the idea is you identify a relatively small but consistent audience of true believers who were sort of, you know, read into the esoteric theory of Freemasonry or Russia conspiracy or whatever they're selling, and you kind of just go with them. You're no longer a national network. You're speaking to a small group.
Yes, and they're very enthusiastic. The trouble, I think the serious point here, though, is that at some point the interests of the Democrat Party diverge from CNN and the other Russia investigation obsessives. Because every time they actually succeed in dragging someone into Congress to talk about it, what happens is it reveals more about Loretta Lynch meeting with Bill Clinton or telling Jim Comey not to call the Hillary investigation an investigation. And so it's actually, the Russia investigation is really a Democrat investigation. And the more you focus on it, the more it drags in Susan Rice and Loretta Lynch and eventually the president himself. And at some point, the Democrats are going to say, look, it's fine for you to do your ratings, but can we please have more Elmo and less Russia? Because this is going to kill us with Loretta Lynch and Susan Rice and all the rest. Their interests are not aligned on this, Tucker.
So what do they do at that point? Do they go back to finding a new murder trial to cover? Or, I mean, what's kind of the next phase for them?
Well, I think the trouble when you go down this thing, it's like we used to have these things long before television, 80 years ago, when there would supposedly be a 5-year-old boy trapped in a well, and the media would camp out around the well to wait for the little boy to be rescued. And that was dramatic in a sob sister way. But if there's no little 7-year-old in the well, if there actually is nothing there, then all you've done in the long run, I think, is destroyed yourself. And to go back to that Malaysian jet thing, they actually are, in this case, they are the... Do you remember on CNN when they thought the Malaysian jet might have flown into a black hole?
Entirely possible.
That's actually what they've done now. They've taken a very small story, and in expanding it, they're flying their network into a black hole. And whether they can emerge from that, I mean, I realize that's the kind of plot twist. That's Anderson Cooper in X-Men 12 or The Avengers when Loki tears up the space-time continuum. And only Anderson Cooper and Elmo in the CNN spaceship can wrest Earth back from the rupture in the space-time continuum. That's the only plot twist left for CNN at this point.
It's going to take me a full day to recover from that. Mark Stein, that's so great.
That's where they're going. It's Elmo at the, Anderson Cooper with Elmo at his co-pilot. That's good luck with that, CNN.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
So, welcome back to Hannity. So it's safe to say CNN is having this major credibility crisis. By the way, our friend Rush Limbaugh is asking if President Trump could be the end of America's premier fake news network. Watch this.
Could Donald Trump be the end of CNN? What a legacy that would be. This Jim Acosta guy, little Jim Acosta, CNN, the guy that lost his cookies yesterday with the press briefing when the cameras weren't turned on. I'll tell you, we got the audio coming up. I'll tell you how this guy reminds me of. Have you ever had a cat, pet cat, you get one of these red laser pointers? And you point it at the floor, and the cat tries to catch it, and you point it up against the sofa, cat runs into the sofa, trying to put it up against the wall, cat runs in. I think that's what the Trump administration is doing with many in the media.
All right, here now with reaction, recording artist Kaya Jones, the co-host of The Five, Kimberly Guilfoyle. All right, Kaya, your first appearance. I mean, I know Rush is funny, but when you really think about it, Donald Trump saying fake news, fake news, fake news, and they keep falling right into the trap. I think he's right.
He's 100% right. At this point, it's messing up actual factual input of what's going on in the country and what's going on in the world. I mean, they're literally using press briefings to drum up fake stories at this point. It's horrible.
Yeah. KG, I mean, it's almost like every night this show writes itself because they keep pushing lies.
Right, and you know what? And the American people are wise to it. They understand what's going on, and they're sick of it because they're smarter than the mainstream media and the liberals and the press are giving them credit for. They see what's going on, which is a concerted effort to try to delegitimize this president of the United States. They are publishing stories that have no business being on air or in print, that are anonymous sources, that are debunked very quickly. There's a lot of reputational smear going around, and also they're trying to stop this president from putting forward the agenda that he was elected to do by the American people, the working men and women that have been left behind, and that's who he's looking out for.
That's who I care about. That's what the election was about. All right, Kaya, here's my question for you, though. because you come from this entertainment background, and then all of a sudden I just noticed through a lot of my friends and people sending me notes on social media that you have emerged as this very outspoken Trump supporter. And and I've seen some of your videos, and they're very entertaining, and they're also hard-hitting. But you also get the other side. You get what KG and I get too, right? You're getting the hate mail.
Oh yeah, but I also get I'm 12 or 13 LGBT conservative. Thank you for making me feel like I'm not alone. And when you get emails like that, it has to happen where we start to actually come out and support our president and support our nation and try to unite, because what's going on is complete division, and they're posing fake news and dividing this nation by doing that. And it's horrible what they've done to Trump and to Melania, the entire presidential family. It's horrible.
Yeah, KG?
Yeah, she's right. And there isn't really the respect that you've seen for the Oval, for the First Family, for the First Lady, and for their beautiful son that you saw, and the respect given and afforded to Barack and Michelle Obama,
Not even close,
Sasha, and Malia. And I'm just asking for them to give this family, give this presidency, and the vote of the American people a chance to succeed and move forward on health care, on tax reform, on immigration, on national security. We're hurting as a country. And how about jobs?
Ivanka and Melania and, you know, Lara and all these women, the Trump women, get attacked. Where's Hillary? Where's Pelosi? Where's Feinstein? They never open their mouth.
Well, that's the problem. It's a total disconnect and a blatant hypocrisy. You don't see any of the female senators on the left standing up for them and saying, don't disrespect these women, treat them with respect that they should be, you know, afforded. That's what really bothers me, especially these are strong, successful women that are, by the way, could be doing a lot of other things, and they're trying to do something for this country.
Kyle, we'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah, I really think that right now we need to be more united, and we are divided right now, and the fake news has to stop.
How about
CNN
they stand
is
up
about
for
to be
women
done.
being attacked unfairly? How about
the fact that Melania has not been on the cover of Vogue and the cover of Vanity Fair and been respected as she is absolutely stunning.
Lucky
or
to
the thing said about Ivanka, really? Pretty
it's
sickening.
horrible. They've attacked her brand.
Yeah, we know them personally. They're lovely people, intelligent, compassionate.
And they deserve better.
They absolutely do. We're lucky to have them. They should be treated that way.
All right, guys, good to see you. Kaya, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.